places where silence carries weight, where every turned page echoes like a warning whisper, and where the shadows between the shelves seem to watch every movement. The Millbrook Public Library was one such place, especially when the full moon rose on the horizon like a pale, merciless eye. Marcus Thompson knew this feeling well. Over the past 6 months, he had developed a routine that bordered on obsession. Every time the lunar calendar marked the approach of the full moon, he prepared for a battle no one else could understand. An intimate war against something that resided within him, something awakened by the silver light and threatened to destroy everything he had built in his 33 years of life. The transformation had begun the previous fall after a chance encounter on a trail in the Adirondacks. Marcus vaguely remembered a creature emerging from the trees, searing pain, and waking up 3 days later in a hospital with injuries doctors couldn't fully explain. The scars on his chest and arms told a story his mind refused to accept, but his body knew the visceral truth. Now, wearing the red turtleneck that had become a sort of battle uniform, Marcus walked the empty streets of Millbrook toward his chosen refuge. His Adidas sneakers thudded against the damp asphalt, while his navy blue jeans swayed with each determined step. He had discovered that the controlled environment of the library offered the best chance of containing what he became during these cursed nights. The strategy was simple, almost desperately logical. If he locked himself in a secure location, surrounded by solid walls and away from any innocent bystanders, perhaps he could undergo the transformation without causing irreparable damage. The library closed at 9 o'clock at night, and Marcus had obtained a copy of the key through his position as a city systems consultant. Technically, it was a breach, but he considered it a lesser evil compared to the alternative. His blue eyes, already beginning to show signs of the predatory intensity that emerged on these nights, swept the deserted streets as he approached the Victorian building that housed thousands of books and soon a terrible secret. The library's dark windows seemed to watch him as if the building itself knew what was coming. Marcus felt the first stirrings of unease creep up his spine. It wasn't pain yet, just a slowly growing sense of discomfort, like an itch beneath the skin that couldn't be reached. He checked his watch. It was 9:15 at night. I had a few hours before the transformation would truly begin, but I knew it was best to be prepared. The lock on the library's side door easily yielded to his key, and Marcus entered the shadowy building. The familiar smell of old books, dust, and floor cleaner greeted him like a melancholy embrace. He locked the door behind him and activated the internal alarm system, an added security measure that would prevent any unsuspecting intruder from discovering him during his transformation. The bookshelves towered around him like silent sentinels, creating narrow corridors that disappeared into darkness. Marcus had specifically chosen the reference section on the second floor, a secluded, windowless area that offered maximum containment. He climbed the wooden stairs, each step creaking softly under his weight, echoing through the vast silence of the building. Arriving on the second floor, Marcus began his preparation routine. He moved some heavy tables to block the main entrances, creating a makeshift barricade that he hoped would be enough to contain him. His hands were already beginning to tremble slightly, a sign that his body was preparing for the transformation that would come with the peak of the full moon, still a few hours away. Preparation always followed the same meticulous ritual. Marcus had learned, through painful experiences and some dangerously close to exposure, that every detail mattered when it came to containing the beast within him. He removed his wallet, keys, and cell phone, placing them in a locked drawer of a reference desk. Personal objects had a disturbing tendency to trigger human memories during the transformation, creating a mental haze that made control even more difficult. His hands, still trembling slightly, checked each window in the reference section. All were firmly closed and locked, the heavy velvet curtains drawn to block out any direct moonlight. Marcus had learned that direct exposure to the full moon's rays accelerated and intensified the transformation in ways he preferred to avoid. In the dim light of the library, illuminated only by the emergency lights that never completely dimmed, he felt a little more in control of the situation. The clock on the wall read 10:45. Marcus estimated he had about an hour before the changes truly began. During that time, he would try to calm down, perhaps even manage to read a few pages of a technical book that might distract him from his growing anxiety. The irony was not lost on him. A man hiding among books to escape his own primal nature. He settled into a reading chair between two tall bookshelves, surrounded by volumes on engineering, mathematics, and applied sciences. Dry, logical subjects that helped keep his mind focused on the civilized, rational world. Marcus opened a computer systems manual, but the words seemed to dance across the page as his vision began to shift imperceptibly. The first wave of pain always came as a surprise, even when he was expecting it. A deep cramp that spread from the muscles of his neck to the base of his spine, as if something inside him was fighting to escape. Marcus dropped the book to the floor with a dull thud that echoed through the empty bookshelves. His hands gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. Breathing became a conscious exercise, inhaling slowly through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, trying to maintain some semblance of calm as his body began to betray its humanity. Marcus had read about meditation and mind control techniques, hoping they might help during these crucial hours. So far, success had been limited, but he clung to any hope of maintaining his human consciousness throughout the process. His blue eyes began to reflect the limited light more intensely, like those of a nocturnal animal. The stubble covering his chin seemed darker, thicker, though that might just be his imagination. Marcus rose from his armchair and began pacing in circles among the bookshelves, an instinctive attempt to release the restless energy building in his muscles. The shadows between the books seemed to shift and undulate, though he knew this was merely a result of his altered perception. During previous transformations, he had noticed his senses sharpen dramatically before the physical changes actually began. He could hear the ticking of the wall clock with disturbing clarity, smell every chemical used to clean the building, and perceive microscopic variations in the air temperature. Midnight approached like an inevitable sentence, and Marcus knew that no matter how many precautions he took or how many barriers he built, the transformation would happen. His only hope was that the thick walls of the library would be enough to contain the roars to come, and that in the morning, when he regained his human form, he would find no evidence that he had harmed anyone during his hours as a monster. The transformation always began with the bones. Marcus felt the first crack in his ribs, a sharp sound like snapping twigs that reverberated through his chest. He doubled over, his hands instinctively moving to protect his torso as waves of pain radiated from his core to his extremities. His red turtleneck began to stretch as his muscles expanded, the fibers of the fabric protesting the impossible anatomical changes taking place. His fingers gripped the edge of a nearby bookshelf, his nails already beginning to lengthen and darken. Marcus could feel his teeth shifting inside his mouth, his canines slowly extending as his jaw began to reshape. The taste of blood spread across his tongue as his gums adjusted to the new dental configuration. He tried to focus on human thoughts, on memories of his normal life, but the pain made it nearly impossible to maintain any coherent train of thought. The shelves around him seemed to lean inward, creating a claustrophobic feeling that intensified his growing panic. Marcus had chosen this location with the safety of others in mind, But now he wondered if he had trapped himself. The space that had seemed suitable for containment when he was still fully human now felt cramped and restrictive as his body grew in size. His muscles contracted violently, causing him to slam into a bookshelf laden with architectural books. Heavy volumes fell to the floor with loud crashes that echoed through the silent building like gunshots. Marcus momentarily worried that the noise might attract unwanted attention, but that worry was quickly swallowed up by another wave of transformation that swept through his nervous system. The skin on his arms and neck began to itch intensely, as if millions of tiny needles were piercing the surface. He knew hair was beginning to emerge, first as a dark shadow beneath the skin, then bursting through the pores in irregular tufts. His hands moved to rip off his shirt, which was now dangerously restricting his breathing, but his fingers had already partially transformed into claws that tore the fabric to shreds. Marcus's vision altered dramatically as his eyes adapted to the nighttime hunt. The shadows of the library became translucent, revealing details previously invisible to normal human perception. He could see dust particles floating in the air, perceive microscopic variations in the texture of book pages, detect the heat trail left by anyone who had walked these halls during the day. His auditory senses expanded beyond what any human could comprehend. Marcus could hear the electric hum of emergency lights, the barely perceptible settling of the building structure, even the movement of small rodents in the walls. Each sound amplified until it became nearly deafening, creating a sensory cacophony that threatened to overwhelm his already fragmented consciousness. The library's scent became a complex olfactory map that told the story of every person who had visited the place in the past few days. Marcus could distinguish individual scents, detect traces of fear or anxiety that had lingered in the air, smell the metallic odor of printer's ink mixed with the organic scent of aged paper. This sensory avalanche was simultaneously fascinating and terrifying, a window into a world of perception that existed beyond ordinary human experience. His legs buckled involuntarily as his bones lengthened and reshaped themselves. Marcus fell to his knees amidst the scattered books, his transformed hands leaving deep scratches in the polished wooden floor. The pain had evolved from sharp to a constant burning that permeated every fiber of his being, as if he were being remade from the inside out by a force that recognized no limits or mercy. Marcus's human consciousness began to fragment like broken glass, each piece reflecting a different memory as the werewolf's primal mind emerged from the depths of his subconscious. He remembered quiet mornings sipping coffee in his kitchen, the feel of computer keys under his fingers during long workdays, the smiles of colleagues as he solved complex technical problems. These memories seemed to belong to someone else now, fragments of a life that was quickly becoming inaccessible. His muscles continued to expand, completely tearing the remains of his red shirt. His jeans held out longer, but eventually the seams gave way as his legs assumed a configuration more suited to running and powerful leaps. Marcus tried to cling to the last vestiges of his self-control, but the transformation had progressed beyond the point where human will could influence the process. The snout slowly emerged from his face, pushing his human features into an impossible configuration that was part man, part beast. His nostrils flared to accommodate an extraordinarily developed olfactory system, capable of detecting nuances of smell that existed far beyond normal human perception. Marcus could smell the fear that had permeated these walls for decades. The cold sweat of students during final exams, the anxiety of researchers struggling against impossible deadlines. His ears elongated and repositioned, creating an appearance that was simultaneously familiar and alien. Every sound in the library became part of a three-dimensional auditory map he could instinctively navigate. The ticking of the clock became a hypnotic beat that seemed to synchronize with the changes in his body, marking each second of his transformation with metronomic precision. The creature Marcus was becoming retained aspects of his original human appearance, but distorted through a primordial lens that emphasized power, speed, and predatory prowess. His dark brown hair remained slicked back, though it now framed a face that was a disturbing fusion of man and wolf. His blue eyes retained their color, but gained a piercing intensity that seemed capable of seeing through any subterfuge or lie. Marcus's transformed hands explored his new body with a curiosity that was part fascination, part horror. He could feel the strength now coursing through his muscles, a physical power that surpassed anything he had experienced as a human. His claws could tear through wood as if it were paper, his teeth could crush bone, his legs could propel him across distances impossible for any human athlete. But with this power came a hunger that transcended any normal appetite. It wasn't just a desire for food, but a visceral need to hunt, to stalk, to dominate anything that moved within its territory. Marcus could feel this hunger growing in his chest like a fire that threatened to consume any shred of humanity still remaining in his altered consciousness. The library, which moments before had offered comfort and security, now seemed like a prison inadequate to contain what he had become. The bookshelves that had seemed so solid and protective when he was still human now presented themselves as fragile obstacles that could easily be destroyed by his new strength. Marcus experimentally tested one of the barricades he had constructed, and the heavy table shifted with disturbing ease under the pressure of his claws. The transformation was nearly complete, but his human consciousness still struggled to maintain any level of control over the creature's actions. It was like trying to drive a speeding car while sitting in the passenger seat, able to observe but unable to significantly influence its fate. Marcus knew he needed to find a way to channel the predatory energy now dominating his system, or risk causing damage his human form could never forgive or forget. The werewolf Marcus had become began systematically exploring his surroundings with an intelligence that was simultaneously primal and cunning. Every shadow between the bookshelves offered tactical possibilities, every corridor a potential hunting or escape route. The creature moved with unearthly fluidity, its bare feet making only whispers against the wooden floor as it navigated obstacles with feline precision. Bloodlust pulsed through his veins like a powerful drug, creating an urgency that threatened to overwhelm any shred of human rationality still lingering in his transformed mind. Marcus struggled to maintain some control over his predatory impulses, but found his influence over the creature's actions limited and intermittent. It was like trying to control a lucid dream where consciousness could observe but rarely direct the course of events. His nostrils caught something that made every muscle in his body tense with anticipation. Fresh air, a barely perceptible current that carried the scents of the night outside. Damp grass, asphalt, and something more interesting, the olfactory trail of human life that had recently passed through the area. The werewolf followed the scent like a hunting dog following a trail, his heightened senses mapping every nuance of the aromatic trail that stretched through the library. The source of the draft turned out to be devastatingly simple. A window at the north end of the reference section, partially hidden behind a heavy curtain that Marcus had briefly checked during his preparation. The building's Victorian structure included windows that could be opened by pushing upward, and this particular one had not been completely closed. A gap of perhaps 2 inches allowed night air to infiltrate the library, bringing with it promises of the outside world that now seemed irresistibly alluring. Marcus desperately tried to send mental signals to the creature, begging it to ignore the temptation of the open window. But the werewolf had detected more than just fresh air. Its superior sensory abilities had isolated the specific sense of at least 3 different individuals who had walked along the sidewalk in front of the library in the last few hours. A woman wearing floral perfume, a man who had recently smoked a cigarette, and something younger, perhaps a teenager who carried the aroma of fast food and youthful anxiety. The window became the creature's sole focus. Its claws explored the frame, testing the strength of the ancient wood and discovering that it would be relatively easy to force the opening wide enough for its passage. The glass had been painted repeatedly over the years, creating layers that could be silently broken if pressure was applied in the right places. Marcus felt his human consciousness gradually being pushed into the background as predatory instincts took over. The rational part of his mind screamed warnings about the dangers of leaving the safety of the library. But these concerns were like distant whispers compared to the roar of the hunting instincts that now dominated his nervous system. The creature placed its transformed hands at the base of the window and began applying gradual upward pressure. The wood groaned softly, a sound imperceptible to normal human ears, but echoing through the werewolf's heightened senses like an invitation to freedom. Each additional inch of opening brought an avalanche of new smells and sounds from the outside world, creating a sensory map of the neighborhood that stretched for several blocks in every direction. The sense of humanity intensified as the opening widened. Marcus could detect at least 12 different individuals within a 6-block radius, each with their own unique olfactory signature that told a story about their lives, fears, and vulnerabilities. The temptation to explore these possibilities grew stronger with each passing moment, like a rising tide, threatening to sweep away any remaining resistance. The window yielded completely to the persistent pressure of the transformed claws, opening with a barely audible whisper that seemed to echo through the silent structure of the library, like a cry for freedom. Night air poured through the opening, bringing with it a symphony of scents that made the werewolf's every predatory instinct ignite with ravenous anticipation. Marcus watched in growing horror as his human consciousness became a helpless spectator to the actions of the creature that had taken over his body. The view from the window revealed the residential neighborhood of Millbrook, stretching out beneath the silvery light of a full moon. Houses with manicured lawns, cars parked in private driveways, lit windows promising warmth and vulnerability. To Marcus's human consciousness, it was a familiar panorama of quiet suburban life. To the creature he had become, it was a buffet of possibilities that awakened a hunger that transcended any normal physical need. The werewolf moved through the opening with an agility that defied its considerable muscle mass. Its movements were fluid as water, every muscle coordinated in perfect harmony to facilitate passage through the confined space. Once outside the building, the creature clung to the brick wall with supernatural ease, its claws finding purchase in microscopic irregularities in the surface that would be invisible to any human climber. The descent to the ground was executed with feline grace, each movement calculated to minimize noise and maximize efficiency. The werewolf landed softly on the damp grass surrounding the library, its bare feet instantly adapting to the uneven terrain. For the first time since the beginning of the transformation, the creature was free of the claustrophobic confines of the library, and Marcus could feel a burst of primal euphoria radiate through its altered consciousness. The neighborhood's scents organized themselves into a 3-dimensional olfactory map that revealed the location and movement of every life form within a considerable radius. A family watching television 3 houses to the right, an elderly couple preparing for bed in the yellow house across the street, a restless domestic dog that had detected the presence of something predatory and now moved nervously in its fenced yard. Each aromatic signature told a story that Marcus's transformed mind could read like an open book. The human consciousness, struggling to maintain some influence over the creature's actions, desperately tried to direct its attention to uninhabited areas. Perhaps the municipal park a few blocks away, where the creature could run and release energy without the risk of dangerous encounters. But the werewolf was being guided by impulses that recognized no ethical considerations or safety concerns. The proximity of vulnerable human life exerted a magnetic pull that was nearly impossible to resist. Each step through the damp grass left footprints that would be discovered in the morning. Physical evidence of the presence of something that shouldn't exist in a civilized suburban neighborhood. Marcus worried about the consequences of his nocturnal escapade, but these worries were like distant echoes compared to the predatory urgency that now controlled his movements and decisions. The full moon bathed the neighborhood in silvery light, transforming familiar landscapes into primal hunting grounds. Shadows became potential hiding places. Every movement of curtains in illuminated windows hinted at an unsuspecting human presence. The werewolf moved through this transformed environment with a confidence born of millions of years of predatory evolution, every sense attuned to detect opportunity and vulnerability. Marcus tried one last time to regain control of his transformed body, focusing all his remaining willpower in a desperate attempt to direct the creature back to the safety of the library. For a moment it seemed he might succeed, that his humanity might prevail over his primal instincts. But then the wind shifted, bringing a new set of scents that included something particularly provocative. The scent of human fear mixed with feminine perfume, emanating from a house where a window remained open to the night breeze. The werewolf turned his head toward the tantalizing scent, his blue eyes shining with a predatory intensity that promised this night would be unlike any other. Marcus knew, with a certainty that cut through his fractured consciousness like a cold blade, that his carefully planned precautions had failed utterly. The creature was free, ravenous, and surrounded by possibilities his human mind refused to fully contemplate.